Hello everyone. I wanted to do a video on inflation last week, but I didn't have an opportunity, so I wanted to do it now. It's the the core CPI that came out last week. The consumer price index, they said, was at 1.6%, and the core inflation was at 0.6%. Now they're claiming there's almost no inflation. I mean, unless you actually eat, or you drive a car, or you heat your house, there are signs of inflation. It's in the higher prices that we're all paying for all this stuff. I mean, they inflated the money supply, by a couple $1 trillion, and now it's showing up. I mean, it's obvious that there's price increases as of inflation, but the way that they figure it, it shows that we don't have it. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window, taking the world away from a reserve currency which was backed by gold. And he stopped those countries from being able to request gold for their paper dollars. By taking us on to a paper fiat currency and away from gold, Nixon totally changed the future of the monetary system. Now, another trick that Nixon came up with was with the Labor Department. He had the seasonally adjusted and the non-seasonally adjusted unemployment numbers. He had them so that whichever one was lower was the one he said that they should publish, and that became the normal way that they started doing it, after his presidency. Beyond that, Nixon also had his chairman of the Federal Reserve at the time, Arthur Burns. He said that we need to do something about these inflation numbers, this CPI. We need to come up with some other number that we can front run and we can put out there as more important. And so Arthur came up with taking food and energy, which happened to be kind of embarrassing at the time, 1973-74. He took food and energy out and said, okay, this is going to be our core inflation. Food and energy, they move up and down too much. They're too volatile, so we'll take those out and we'll have this core inflation. Now, the core inflation just came out last week. It's the lowest since 1957. While everything's rising, commodities are rising. Cotton is up from $149 a ton up to $270 a ton. I mean, that's almost doubled. Now, besides just the cotton, we have all other commodities are screaming up this year across the board. Also, healthcare costs up 7.3%, college tuition's up 7%, gasoline's up 9.5%, heating oil's up 15%. Everything's going up. The stock market's up, bonds are up. What's going down? Well, the credibility of the core inflation number, that's what's going down. As well as tobacco and new and used cars. That's supposedly what's keeping the core inflation so low. Everything's skyrocketing. It's the way they figure the core inflation number, the core CPI, that they use for their cost of living adjustments. They're not even giving the Social Security recipients a raise for the second year in a row. I mean, it's totally ridiculous how they come up with these numbers. They're totally bogus numbers. They're used so that they don't have to give raises to people on assistance for cost of living raise. And it wasn't only by Nixon that this core inflation, that this core CPI was adjusted. We have 3 other adjustments that were made in the 1990s. We had product substitution, geometric weighting, and hedonic adjustments. These were done to the core CPI. The way that they figure it, they made these changes in the 1990s, which also push it down. There's no way we could possibly have 0.6% inflation. It's just totally absurd. So if we look at the product substitution, they say that, if the prices go up, we're just going to assume that people are going to switch from flank steak to hamburger meat. So we'll use the price of hamburger meat in our figures. And then, but of course, if prices are down real low, they're not going to adjust their figures to figure that people are going from hamburger meat jumping up to filet mignon. they would never go up. It's always to push everything down. And then they have this thing called geometric weighting, where goods and services become more expensive. And so they figure, well, people aren't going to use those things so much, so we're going to weight them a lot less in our figures. We're not going to weight them as heavily. And then the hedonic adjustment, I mean, this is the craziest thing ever. You take a $1,500 laptop, and you take a $2,000 laptop. The $2,000 laptop has a camera on it, and so it's more productive than the $1,500 one. So in their core CPI, they'll make the figures so that the $2,000 laptop is actually cheaper because it's more productive. I mean, if you're fooling around with things like this, I guess you could push the thing down to 0% and just say that there's no inflation at all, which is basically, close to what they're saying.